talk to me about how you guys prefer to set up potentially your dosing system.
But it is a new product. It hit the shelves, I believe, like last week or the week before.
For this tank, I would lean towards a flame fin to mini. That would be a really good worker.
It's the same 2 square filter socks that most people are familiar with, but there's a little twist on it now.
Hey Reef Builders, my name is Remy, and today we head back to Aquashella Daytona. With the help of our friends at Top Shelf Aquatics and Eshopps, Evie is going to take you through step by step how to start an SPS dominant aquarium. This video is a little bit longer. I feel like it'd be a perfect companion to aquarium maintenance. Before we head back in time, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you know whenever we upload new videos. And you're gonna want to, because we've got a ton of great videos coming out before the new year. All right, let's head back to Aquashella Daytona with our field reporter, Evie.
Hey Reef Builders, Evie here at Aquashella Daytona in 2023, and we're actually going to talk about how to set up an SPS tank here with the help of Top Shelf Aquatics' Greg. And we're going to talk about the dry goods that you guys prefer to use in these systems that give optimal health and optimal just sustainability inside of the aquarium, right?
This is a brand new tank. I believe it's the first one out in the world, and they should be shipping to other retailers, I believe in the next couple of weeks to month at max.
So let's talk about it. The stand is absolutely stunning. I love this. This is called the Mariner 70. I love how it's right here. You get that nice blue Eshopps detail
really nice
going
pop
on.
of color going on there.
Yes.
And it matches everything.
It does.
It's the same 2 square filter socks that most people are familiar with, but there's a little twist on it now. It's actually removable. So you can take your favorite roller mat and pop it right in there. And that is new to the Eshopps sump here. And they're just trying to kind of keep up. Roller mats are super popular.
And you're going to be able to pull the whole thing out.
Yep.
Okay, so then after we move from there, we've got our skimmer.
We've got our skimmer chamber, and it does fit most of the skimmers you see out on the market. I know we have the Eshopps one under here today.
And something to keep in mind is that this one is more narrow.
It is.
So definitely take your measurements if you're planning on going with this sump. If you don't potentially use the Eshopps skimmer, you're going to have a very narrow area to work with, so keep that in mind.
Finally, return pump chamber, pretty standard. Again, a little bit on the narrow side, so you definitely want to check your pumps on that. But it does come with all the plumbing you need. A lot of tanks don't do that. It has the flex tube that you need, and the plumbing comes pre-assembled, which is really nice on this aquarium.
That is really nice.
So you don't have to work with any plumbing at all, just screw it together and you're good to go. Eshopps is going to be sending ATOs out that are specially made, or excuse me, oh my goodness, reservoirs that are specially made to fit in there. And they're going to hold a little bit over 5 gallons. So they're made specially to fit in there on the side, and you can use whatever ATO you want to go with it.
They actually put very special detail into the stand.
They did. So this is an enamel-based paint on the stand, and it's been cured and dried in a kiln, but as well, this is full marine grade plywood, and it is really wooded. It's not particle board.
Yeah, that makes all the difference because you're not going to deal with swelling. And then whenever you shut the doors, you have this really nice flush situation. It's going to look a lot more like furniture, which is definitely something that has become way more popular as the years progress. When you're dealing with any type of tank situation, you want it to look nice in your home. A lot of times even accenting your furniture or the cabinetry that you have throughout your home. So let's talk about what's going on up here.
Yeah,
I heard that our returns are also special.
They are. So from what I've talked to with Eshopps, they are made on a standard lock line, but the cool part about that is they've partnered with VCA, and they have random flow generators in the box. So your plumbing's gonna come with random flow, so you're gonna get a really nice even flow across the tank because you do have a double-sided return here. It's not a single in the middle or off to a side. You're gonna have really nice flow in the tank as well.
Let's talk about the cool stuff that you get to put in there. So we're gonna start with this bad boy.
Yeah, so another really cool product. It's not quite new to the show, but it is a new product. It hit the shelves, I believe, like last week or the week before. The CJ contactless heaters. So this is a fully controllable heater. Super cool product, and it's brand new to the shelves. So you should start seeing them here pretty quickly.
Excellent. And then next, we actually do have the Nero 5s.
Yep.
Now, you guys recommend doing 2.
We do.
In this type of system, because as you decide to go more or completely SPS, one of the main things that you really do need to take into consideration is flow rates and keeping these animals healthy and happy.
Exactly. And then we generally recommend having 2 because you do want a good cross flow on the aquarium. So you want to have those nice surges, those nice waves, kind of fighting each other a little bit. In a small tank like this, you could maybe get away with 1, but we would almost always go with 2.
They can be an investment piece for sure. And you want to make sure that whenever you're dealing with SPS, you do want to keep them at their healthiest, and that does really require investing in good equipment to make sure that you do that for as long as you possibly can and keep them happy.
Exactly.
Another thing that we've got is we've got the Osmolator by Toonsy.
The 3155 here has been out for more years than I can even remember at this point. Great auto top off, has 2 different fail safes in it, a high and a low, and just really good auto top off in general. And this is probably one of the key things to a stable reef aquarium.
Right.
So keeping your salinity stable, keeping your water level stable is one of the biggest things to keep in mind.
Now we've got your Vectra M2. Now this is really heavy duty, but it looks like it's going to work perfectly for what's going on down below.
It is, and the nice part is, even though those Neros are AI, they're going to work in the same app. So all this is going to be app controlled. This is going to go through Mobius. So we're going to be able to control this from at least your home, and with some updates, you can do it even around the world. So some of these things are Wi-Fi compatible, and if you ever are into controllers, they're controllable through there as well.
Right, and whenever you're doing an SPS tank or even any other type of tank, the more technology you have, especially if you work long hours away from home, you tend to possibly go on vacations or even travel for a living, anything that can help you while you're gone and out is now existing for the most part. You can monitor your tank from anywhere, and even if you want to, you can put a cam on your tank as well. Yeah. So now let's talk about rock work. And so I'll let you set this in here because you've got a bit more height than I do for it.
I do. We have
so
1 or 2 of these.
Tell me about what you guys like to try to do when it comes to the rock structures and how you think about what kind of animals and how you're going to place them when you're dealing with SPS.
Yeah, of course. So you don't want just one big piece of rock. If you look here, we have branches all throughout, and those branches are all at different levels, and they're all going out in different directions. So you're not just going to have a single piece that's going to shade out the whole aquarium here if you put one piece here.
Maximum flow potential is very important when you're dealing with SPS because the way that the flow actually maneuvers through the tank can help shape them as they grow throughout all the years.
For sure, especially like your plating things or your acros, that flow is really going to affect if they're going up or out. That's all affected by the flow. Perfect.
I really like this one.
Let's see. Okay, I'm going
Might
to slide
wanna scoot
this
this
one
guy
over here. A lot of our pieces are made so you got to fit them in one way.
I love the shape of this piece, and because these are relatively light, it would be so easy to back away, shift something a little bit, no matter where you're at technically in the game of doing everything. So it's not going to stir up technically a lot of stand if you maybe have to tilt this guy one way
or the other
due to growth, or maybe just the aesthetics of it. So now let's talk about lighting.
Probably the most important thing for a tank,
yes,
one would say.
Most definitely.
And I will say we're a little partial in our lighting. We definitely like Radions, especially the new G6s. Now, there's a big debate if you're going to do a Pro or a Blue. We definitely like the Blue a little bit more, but the Pro definitely can grow maybe even a little faster than the Blue here, but the Blue just has that pop of color that we truly love. I've been with Top Shelf now for 7 years. There's some lights in there that have been there longer than me. So these lights are designed to run long term and put in that work every day.
Excellent. So now tell me a little bit about something that may be overlooked when you're dealing with a tank is keeping your light fixtures clean.
Yes.
This is a very big thing that can be overlooked in general that no one really thinks about until they go up to their tank and they're like, what is this on the top of my fixture? It's crusty, it's dusty. What am I going to do with this?
Yeah, believe it or not, you get a lot of dust in these things.
You do.
And a lot of salt will build up on that dust.
Yes, it will.
Ecotech's made it pretty simple with these. It's hard to see on the box, but the fans are very easily accessible from the top. Just taking something as quick as a rag once or twice a week, a month even, really helps keep that clean.
We've made it to where you can monitor it very closely. You can see it all through your phone, no matter technically where you are, as long as you've got the app the exact way that you need it to be.
Exactly.
So what else do you think that we might have been missing or we didn't cover yet so far on dry goods?
I think most of our dry goods are covered. The only other thing would maybe be if you want a controller on your tank.
Yes.
You have a couple different options there. So you have Neptune and you have Hydros. There's a couple other ones out there, but they're not quite as easily accessible or maybe as popular. But those two are definitely the big ones nowadays.
Now, you guys do like automating.
We do.
For the most part.
Every one of our systems in the store is completely automated. We technically don't have to touch it. We've been Neptune people for a long, long time, but we're seeing a lot of innovation out of Hydros.
We are seeing a lot of innovation right now, and we'll be covering that also through Reef Builder, so you guys will have to stay tuned for some of that content as well. Okay, so Greg, what do you think? Are we ready to talk about livestock with Blaine?
I think we are, and Blaine is definitely going to be the guy to help you guys out.
All right,
really
excellent.
let you know about that sort
of
thing.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much,
of course.
Greg.
Thank you.
Blaine, well, I'm ready whenever you are. So Blaine, we've already covered our dry goods now with Greg, so I really want to talk about probably the more fun part for me especially is the animals that are going to be going inside. We want this to be an SPS focused tank.
Right.
Now, when you're dealing with SPS, you probably don't want to start with the craziest, most expensive one straight out the gate.
No.
But if you're doing an SPS tank, there are steps or potentially certain animals you do want to start with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about who would you start with if you are doing an SPS strict tank.
For sure. So the first thing I actually want to talk about, and I think we should touch on, is the fact that we need to start our microbiome layer first. So we at Top Shelf Aquatics, we have cycled media that we've been working on and bringing out to the public for a long time now. And with a tank, you want to make sure you start a really good layer of bacteria, anything that's beneficial to the tank. And with an SPS tank, you don't want to start off on the wrong foot, right? So you'll end up you'll go through your diatoms, you'll go through your ugly cycle, but if you don't do that, you'll skip it and you could end up faltering in the long run. Once you get your microbiome started, then you can kind of jump into those more easy to keep SPSs. So we're talking about some Montes, the Digitatas, the Caps, the Paloenensis, all of those. So we're doing some of those. There's the Anacroporas as well. We just recently did a video on our page talking about the top 10 beginner SPS corals.
Oh, that would be fabulous. We'll probably link that video down below this one so that way you guys can check that out on Top Shelf's page.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been culturing these for so long in-house that we have some Acropora as well that we recommend for people to start out with, like the Bill Murray, things like that, because they've been in aquariums for so long, they've kind of grown accustomed to those situations. So bringing them into a tank will definitely be able to start you off on the right foot.
Tell me a little bit about when you're starting with your first SPS, what do you guys like to do or prefer to do with your lighting? Because you may not have your lights set right where you want them to be exactly right off the bat. This can be a very gradual process. So let's cover that.
So we like to do par readings all the time. It's really good. If you have the opportunity, most local fish stores will rent them out to you so you can bring them to your home and then you can get a par rating on your tank. So we're running the G6s, right? We'll have them over this tank. After I get them set up, I'm gonna wanna do a par reading of what we're gonna wanna do. The other thing too is they have an acclimation schedule as well. So you can bring the corals in and you can get them acclimated over the course of several days, weeks, something like that. We like to start low and we start to work our way up. After we see it starting to be successful, anything like that, then we'll slowly work our way up in the scape. So for example, we could start out down here and we could slowly work our way up so that way we get a higher par reading and we can pull the colors out that we've been wanting to get.
What do you guys like to do as far as fish? Are you adding fish just yet? Or are you trying to let her ride out very clean at the moment?
So you have to have an ammonia source, right? So you're gonna have to do that, whether it be bottled ammonia, but for us, we like to do saltwater mollies. So we culture them in-house, so we've added saltwater mollies.
They're so cool.
They're really cool.
I love them.
There's only one fish really in the world that doesn't care if it's saltwater or fresh, and they're really one of them.
And they clean algae too.
They do,
they're
great.
A worker later.
They're absolutely great grazers. I tell people all the time, you can get them into a tank for a cycle, and then after you've had them cycling a tank, throw them into your frag tank, and they'll just eat away at all the algae. So they're really a good addition. And also if you have a low flow refugium down below, they do really well down there because they'll pick away at all the nuisance algae and not really eat your more high-end algae.
Plus they're easy to catch. If you ever have to chase that little dude around and get him out because maybe he's just not really working aesthetic aesthetically up here for you, he's not going to be a nightmare like a damsel would be or anything of that nature.
For sure. So you have your beginner SPS, and then you're ready to graduate to your intermediate SPS, right? It's like riding a bike. You start with your training wheels.
Then you take one off.
Then you take one off, and then you take the other, then you take your other one off, right? So it's kind of taking that next step up. And at our farm, we have all kinds of different ones. You're gonna go back to some of the other monopora, so you have the beast monopora, so that's another paloenensis, that's gonna be a good one. We have other acropora species like the Long Island, the orangesicle. Some of those would be really good to add into the system.
What are we looking at with flow? Are we changing our flow up while we go through this process?
For us, we like to try and get the schedule of the flow right off the start. We like to try and get it in there and get the flow going to where we're seeing success from our beginner SPS. And if you're bringing some other corals and you see that they're not getting quite the polyp extension and things like that, then you can start working on cranking that flow up, right? So it's mainly about creating a baseline. Where are you gonna find that happy place for all your corals? And then where can you bring them to that next level? It's always taking a step up. So basically, we just want to try and find the perfect placement and the perfect spot for our flow so that we're getting it all throughout the tank. We're really big proponents on having a bare bottom, so that way if you really wanted to, you could stick something right down in the back corner and you're always going to have good turnover. The more turnover, the better success for SPS.
Right, and well, and also just the simple fact that everything's getting flow all the way around.
Right.
You're not dealing with over sliming happening or anything of that nature. Maybe even like a less than optimal growth pattern.
For sure.
As well, because you do get to a point where you're like, this SPS isn't quite growing the way I anticipated it would. I want it to do something a little bit more. That could be something that may just need to be considered through your flow rates.
For sure. And the other thing you can do too with SPS, and I always tell people it's really like bonsai. So you can cut away and change it and place it in a perfect location within your mini colony to try and get the growth that we want to have. We do it at the farm all the time. If we're getting a growth in a certain direction and we want it to go the other direction, we can snip off a piece, get it glued to the mother colony and have it start growing into that direction.
Talk to me about how you guys prefer to set up potentially your dosing system, because now you're going to have to start thinking about consumption rates going on in the tank.
Right, so at first, when you first get your tank going, you don't have to be dosing right off the start, right?
Correct.
The big thing to be doing is you want to be testing. You want to know what your numbers are, but you don't want to be chasing the numbers. I tell people that all the time. It's about stability.
Don't chase your numbers.
You don't have to.
Don't do it.
Look at your corals, and your corals will tell you if they're happy. And so for us, we like to try and get the right baseline, and once we have that, we're big supporters of calc. We like to use calc in the farm, and people, I've seen so many tanks over the course of many years. I've been in this for 20 years, and calc is kind of stood against time, basically.
It really has. It's been around like forever.
It's been around for a very long time, and it works. I mean, a lot of the big, nice tanks that you see run calc. All of the farm is on calc. So we do that. We'll also dose other things depending on what we have. And every single, it's going to be Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we do testings on every single system. We have 30,000 gallons of water volume. It's a lot of testing to do.
Just a little bit.
When you start getting a lot of that growth, like you just said, the numbers are going to dip. And so you have to be able to fulfill those numbers back to where you originally were.
Correct. And so a really good way to actually monitor that is you could keep like a diary for your tank, keep a log. You could do it digitally.
Right, and I just recently set up a tank at my house, and I'm going to be doing SPS dominance. So I do a 3-check system. When I leave in the morning, the lights are off. So I hit it with a flashlight every single morning. I check everything that's inside the tank, and you need to know what you've been putting in the tank, right?
Yes.
So if you don't know what you've been adding to the tank, you can't check it, right? So I check in the morning. When I get home from work, I feed the fish. So I'm physically looking at the tank, I'm feeding the fish, and I'm seeing how everybody's doing.
And you're looking at your fish too.
Exactly. You need to make sure you're paying attention to your fish, to your cleanup crew, to all things. And that's another thing is cleanup crew, you need to make sure you're replenishing it over time. These guys aren't just something that are gonna maintain, long term. Sometimes you're gonna have to go ahead and get more cleanup crew.
Yeah.
So
you'll find the shells. Sometimes the crabs will eat the snail, and sometimes the snail flips over and it gets stuck and it dies. Like, this is just part of the process.
Exactly. And so then I'll watch one more time as lights are coming down. Once lights switch off, I'll check one more time as the fish are starting to find their caves to go to bed. I'll check on the corals again, and that's usually a really good time to spotlight your corals to look for any kind of pests, any kind of issues, because sometimes the blue lights will bleed out what you're really looking for. And when you can kind of see the coral with a specific light shining directly on it, not just the entire tank, then you can kind of hone in and see what kind of problems you're looking at.
Right, and then you can also do things like monitor feeding responses, because now potentially if you're about a decent way through your journey, you're going to start doing some sort of feeding
You
process.
will, you'll definitely start feeding. So we do our live feeds that we culture in-house. So Taras Pleskin, he's our lead phycologist on site.
Taras is awesome, by the way.
Taras is probably one of the coolest.
We've done a lot of cool stuff with Taras.
He's easily one of the coolest people I've ever met. But
yes.
So we dose all of the live phytoplankton that we have. So we have 3 strains that we're dosing consistently in farm. And then we also are doing a big amount of benepets. We love benepets. We've really seen that they've been great for us. We're not seeing big spikes in our phosphates and things like that. So benepets has been great for us. So we definitely feed them heavy. They have a new LPS food that we've been using and testing and trying out. And it seems to be really good for the corals. So we've been doing a lot of feedings, and once again, that's going to come back to the testing, right? So
yes.
Do you need to feed? Not all the time, right? You don't have to feed all the time, because sometimes the best food is fish waste, right?
This is true.
Your fish create a great waste that all the corals will eat. But if you're getting all those soaked out and all of them are gone because you're starting to get a really good growth, you're going to want to add in some kind of food source so they can continue growing.
Dealing with fish and their waste and their consumption of food, how do you guys prefer to actually stock a tank with fish? There are some people who err on the side of caution that don't like lots of fish with their SPS. They want it to be super clean. Then there's the others that are kind of like myself, where I want a lot of fish potentially in my system.
So for fish, I'm gonna want to go for some utilitarian fish. Right off the start, yes, I might add in a pair of clownfish or maybe a blenny of sorts to get the tank going, but I'm gonna want some utilitarian fish. So for this tank, I would lean towards a flamefin to mini. That would be a really good worker. They're pecking away all day long.
I love those tanks.
You could do a rabbit fish would be a good one for this tank. And there's the algae blennies that do a really good job as well. There's all kinds of these fish that have a job and a purpose, right? So for SPS as well, you're gonna wanna have wrasses. I know a lot of people don't like 6-line wrasses, but they're
so good for pest control.
They're extremely good for pest control.
Good.
So they can sometimes be jerks in the tank, but if you're looking to make sure that all things are clean and you have someone that I like to call the security guard of the tank going through and inspecting everyone, they're a really good one. They're smaller so they can get in the nooks and crannies.
And they do. If you actually sit and observe a 6-line, you'll notice that they will, because their face is so narrow, they will actually go in and it looks like they are like looking and inspecting. You can see their eyes moving, and then they'll dart with their mouth and they'll actually hit something, and you'll see that maybe he just grabbed a flatworm or something of that nature that somehow you missed, or it snuck in somehow, and that little dude just took it out for you.
For sure.
So having fish that can help you in the long run is super important, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be good looking fish, because the 6-line is a beautiful fish. Success is very optimal when you have it, but you can experience complete bleachings and it feels like it's overnight, but they can give signs and symptoms beforehand.
They will. And
so let's talk about monitoring that.
For sure. I think, you know, a lot of the time we have these corals in our farm that we like to call canaries in the coal mine, right?
Yes.
So you're going to have a coral that, if that coral is starting to act up a little bit, you know the trend's going to begin. The snowball will start. So the Bill Murray that we have is a really good example. If you are starting to lose color on that, if it's browning out, you're going to know something's wrong with the tank. They're a really good notifier of you to be able to be like, all right, I need to go back, I need to check my notes, check my testings, retest, and try to figure out what the root problem is.
So whenever you guys are looking at going backwards and you're doing that sort of thing, I always like to tell people, look as far as 2 or 3 weeks back.
Yes.
Maybe there was something back then that was a little anomaly, that was just a little bit different, that you're like, I'm gonna log that because that may be a potential problem later. It's super important because now you're 3 weeks into the future, you're seeing something that's acting funny, and now you need to go reference that. It's so important because they can have a delayed response.
They can.
And the more that you know, that you document and are aware of it, whether it be cataloging it, you know, through your phone or through some sort of journaling system, the better off you're going to be. I mean, I used to know, because you'll know your tank eventually. You'll get it to where you'll file it away and you can bring it forward, but you never know if, like, maybe you're out of town and someone now sending you a picture and like, hey, click, this one's white today, and you're like, oh no, what's going on?
Sure.
But don't panic. Don't panic if something like that happens, because it's relatively easy to identify perhaps what went wrong.
Yeah, and I think something to remind people all the time, especially with SPS tanks, is success doesn't come overnight.
Correct.
You're not going to have, you know, a flourishing, growing, you know, it's not going to be like your GSP.
And neither does the growth.
No.
The growth is not overnight
right.
either.
And it's not like your GSP where over maybe the course of 2 or 3 weeks you see exponential growth from it. It's going to take time for it to kind of start to take off. And a lot of the time people don't realize that a lot of the acroporus species, they're going to want to encrust first before they end up sending out
They
shooters.
need a good base to
really
stabilize
want,
themselves.
They really want a good base, so that way they can start sending out the branches and start growing into a colony. If you start seeing that maybe your stick is just sitting there and it's just a little nub, but if you're seeing that encrustment, then you're having success. So I like to remind people to not get frustrated. Just trust in what you're doing, believe in it, and remember that if you take the time and you focus in on your tank, you can get the success that you want.
What do you think, Blaine? You think we've covered just about anything? You want to add anything else?
You know, I think we've covered all the bases. I think, you know, take your time, don't rush it. There's no reason to rush. These are animals that are in your care, and you need to really remember that. I tell people all the time, it's like, how do you treat your dog?
Right.
How do you treat
my baby.
Right. How do you treat your cat? Like, oh, I love him so much. That's how I feel about my fish.
Yeah.
And my corals and my entire system. You are basically recreating the ocean, a living ecosystem, a natural little boomy in your own home, and there's so many moving parts and pieces, and you're basically playing, you know, the creator, and so you need to be able to be in touch with it.
Yeah, you've made an ecosystem.
Exactly.
You've made an ecosystem that is detailed to your wants and desires.
Right. Don't follow the trends of what's hot and what's not. I think you find what you like, and then your tank will be such a better tank, and you'll end up caring about it more, and it'll flourish more. Because if you're like, oh, I just wanted this because it was the next best thing, you might not care about it as much. Know what you like and go into it with a positive mindset, and remember, time is of the essence.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you so much, Blaine.
Of course.
This was incredible, and we always appreciate your all's time from Top Shelf coming and hanging out with us in Reef Builders. And that is all for us, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was an excellent breakdown for starting up an SPS tank with the help of Greg and Blaine at Top Shelf. And we will see you guys soon in the next video. Dope.